There's no season quite like spooky season. That's why we do this one a little early each year, because I'm just so dang excited. So much so that I got a nice little reading intro for you guys. Of course he could see only blackness. Such was the treachery of fire, which illuminated small circles by darkening the entire world. Consequences lost all purchase when they became mad, and desperation, when pressed beyond anguish, became narcotic. Most men would rather die in deception than live in uncertainty. For all things there is a toll. We pay in breaths, and our purse is soon empty. I understood wanting to go home. I had been trapped on the other side of a hole in an alien world, and I would have sold my hope of heaven to go home again. Somewhere else, the next world over, in another plane of existence, my brain was screaming hysterically that there was a hole in the world. If there is a way into hell, someone will always find it. We've been living in a saline world filled with blues and yellows and a hint of orange. Life goes on. We are all in the same game, just different levels, dealing with the same hell, just different devils. The serpent closed in closer and closer, its lethal promise igniting something deep within her, the primordial need of every creature that has ever been hurt by another, the need to bite back. If it is a witch they want, then it's a witch they shall have. Hey, what's up, boils and ghouls? Mike back again for another spooky season TBR. It's obviously going to be for the month of October of 2024. Like I said, I do this one a little early each year because I feel like spooky season is when I get the most participation from the audience that's going to read the same things that I read. So they'd like to know a little early. That way they can plan ahead. That way they can purchase a book if maybe they need to do that. And maybe they can do some nice little planning and some research and decide if they want to join me on some of these frightful reads that I do have planned. Now, I am going to be keeping the same format. Notice people have asked me lately, I'm doing the one horror, one sci-fi, one fantasy, one miscellaneous each month. This will be the last month that I do that. So we'll be back to regularly scheduled program after this month, which means a lot more fantasy. I know a lot of people have been asking about that. But for this one, I thought I would kind of keep it in that format, but I'm going to use it with a nice little horror twist into it, for example, science fiction horror, fantasy horror, historical fiction horror, that kind of thing. That's what I've kind of tried to lead into this month to kind of keep that vibe alive. It'll make spooky season seem fresh again. So let's go ahead and kick it off with the first book. Got 4 of them planned, and this one's been a long time coming because one of my patrons sent this to me a long time ago, Steph, and she's really had high praise for the author Brahm, and not just for his artwork, but for his stories as well. And this is going to be Slewfoot, A Tale of Bewitchery. Now, this is very much a historical fiction tale. I think it takes place in 1666. It's got some interesting things. Basically, reading the synopsis of this gives me a little bit. If I think that Speaks the Nightbird by Robert McCammon, if that had been more of a horror story, where in that, it was like, is this lady a witch or not? You got kind of the same things going here. So a little bit of that, a little bit of the Crucible, obviously tied in, and then I think you get a little bit of the fantastical Guillermo del Toro kind of monsters and stuff, and I think that's obviously a lot of fun. Now, Brahm, incredible artist, so he gives the nice little depictions in here of what some of these things look like, and it is horrifying. Don't know if you guys can actually see any of that. But yeah, I've been very interested. Child Thief was one that I was actually recommended to start with by Sarah over at Sarah Reads. She actually recommended Child Thief years ago. But Slewfoot seems to be the one that has drawn my desire at this point to do with it being a little bit more spooky. But for those who don't know what this one is about, let's go ahead and get into that. It's Connecticut in 1666. An ancient spirit awakens in a dark wood, and the wild folk call him Father, Slayer, Protector. But the colonists call him Slewfoot, Demon, and Devil. A spirited young Englishwoman, Abatha, arrives at a Puritan colony betrothed to a stranger, only to become quickly widowed when her husband dies under mysterious circumstances. All alone in this pious and patriarchal society, Abatha fights for what little freedom she can grasp onto, while trying to stay true to herself and her past. Enter Slewfoot, a powerful spirit of antiquity newly woken, and trying to find his own role in the world, healer or destroyer, protector or predator. But as the shadows walk and villagers start dying, a new rumor is whispered. Witch. Both Abatha and Slewfoot must swiftly decide who they are and what they must do to survive in a world intent on hanging any who meddle in the dark arts. Together, they ignite a battle between pagan and Puritan, one that threatens to destroy the entire village, leaving nothing but ashes and bloodshed in their way. So yeah, I mean, you can't read that synopsis and not get a little bit of Speaks of Nightbird out of it. At least that's what I just keep going back to. Maybe it's a similar time period, obviously a similar premise. This one obviously seems like it's going to lean a little bit more into the actual supernatural, which I'll leave it up to you to read Speaks of Nightbird, and you should, to decide if it actually did that or not. But yeah, very excited for this one because Brahm is just an author I've heard a ton about. He's actually interacted with me on Instagram a couple of times. So I'm very interested to see how his writing goes and if it does click for me. Next up, this is kind of a sensitive topic because I don't want people to take it the wrong way, but I have to kind of explain how this goes here. Now, you'll see a lot of booktubers who are like, oh, I need to read this and I need to read that. I never feel like I need to read anything. I feel like I want to read what I want to read, and I will read a lot of things that based off of recommendations and things like that. But I have had this hole in my heart ever since Anne Rice passed away. And I've been looking for a female voice in the horror genre to kind of fill those big, big shoes. So I've been actually doing some research. I've been taking recommendations. I've been looking for some things. And a name that kept coming up for me to kind of fill that void has been T. Kingfisher. Her name has come up a ton in other horror videos I've done. Mostly my Stephen King content, her voice comes up a lot. So I've just said, hey, I got to go ahead and check some of this out. So I did some research. And the one that I keep coming back to is The Hollow Places. Now, this apparently is her take on The Willows by Algernon Blackwood, which I've reviewed on the channel. It's a very, very good story. The Willows actually is one of those that H.P. Lovecraft said scared him when he read it. So talk about the respect of your peers right there. So I don't really know a ton of her outside of that. I've got that. I bought Nettle and Bone, which other people said Nettle and Bone is very much kind of like not exactly horror, but this one really is. So this one should be a lot of fun. I really like what the synopsis says here. But again, I want people to understand that I am looking for that female horror author, that it was the mainstay that Anne Rice was for me for decades. And I'm hoping that this is a fit. Some of the other contenders on here, I think Katrina Ward was one of them. And gosh, I can't, it's called I think it was called Mexican Gothic. I forget the author's name, but that was another one that was kind of the finalist, I guess you say. But this is the one that I went to. And what is The Hollow Places about? Well, pray they are hungry. Kara finds these words in the mysterious bunker that she's discovered behind a hole in the wall of her uncle's house. Freshly divorced and living back home, Kara now becomes obsessed with these cryptic words and starts exploring this peculiar area, only to discover that it holds portals to countless alternate realities. But these places are haunted by creatures that seem to hear thoughts, and the more one fears them, the stronger they become. So anytime you're going to give me some fantasy portal horror, that sounds like a good time. I love messing around with alternate realities and things like that, where it kind of breaks down what's actually happening, what's not. Don't know if it means they're going to end up on the waterways, kind of like you were in The Willows, but I'm not really sure what really more this is about. I mean, that's very, very vague, obviously, but again, you deal with alternate realities and dimensions that might be parallel to ours. Lots of creepy crawlies could be popping up that, those worlds don't find too strange like we would. So anything is possible in a story like this. And so I'm very excited about T. Kingfisher, and I'm hoping that this can be a new lady horror author that I do just love and just become appointment reading for me, because I really do feel like I have a place for that in my wants to do when it comes to the reading of the horror genre. Next up, guys, got to get into a little bit of science fiction horror. One of my favorite books I read when I was younger was H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, because, who doesn't love a good alien invasion story? What I thought about it at the time was like, it was written over 100 years ago. It's very, very good. But man, I wish he really would have gotten into the brutality of the matter. Again, I've always had that grimdark heart in me somewhere. So I always thought, I feel like maybe if that was written for more mature audiences, perhaps it could have been something different. Well, Adam Neville said, I got you. And that's why the next book on here is All the Fiends of Hell, which is one that he says is very much his take on War of the Worlds. It is very much something that really influenced him, and it's something that he wanted to write. So alien invasion, but it is just apparently like full on, like horrific, scary, brutal, and the aliens are take no prisoners. So after the miss that was the new book by James S.A. Corey, where I got that alien invasion story, maybe this one will kind of scratch that itch that I was hoping for. Now, Adam Neville I love the ritual. I read Last Days, and I thought Last Days was just okay, but so many have told me that they think Adam Neville is going to be an author I really like. But even like Adam Neville enthusiasts have said that Last Days was not the book to start with. Now, this is his newest one, and it feels like it's kind of got a mixed reaction. But since I was looking for this kind of specific subgenre here, sci-fi horror, this is the one that kept coming up, and I looked at it as a good excuse to give Adam Neville a try again. So don't worry, I'm still going to do No One Gets Out Alive as well, just not this month. But as for All the Fiends of Hell, the Red Knight of Bells heralds global catastrophe, annihilation on a biblical scale. Seeing the morning is no blessing, and the handful of scattered survivors are confronted by blood-red skies and an infestation of predatory horrors that never originated on Earth. An occupying force intent on erasing the remnants of animal life from the planet across the deserted landscapes of England, bereft of infrastructure and society. The overlooked can either hide or try to outrun the infernal hunting terrors, until a rumor emerges claiming that the sea may offer an escape. Ordinary, unexceptional, and directionless Carl is one of the few who made it through the first night. In the company of two orphans, he flees south, but only into horrifying revelations and greater peril, where a transformed world and expanding race of ravening creatures exist. Driven to the end of the country and himself, he must overcome alien and human malevolence and act in a way that were unthinkable just days before. So yes, end of the world happens. Protect those you love. Do some things that maybe you thought you never would have been capable of. Modern problems require modern solutions, right? I'm very excited for this one because, like I said, Adam Neville is an author I have been very excited to get more into, and a nice alien invasion story always is something that's going to kind of grab my interest a little bit. Now, with the last one here, guys, this is actually kind of a cheat because I don't know if it really would fall under fantasy horror. With this, it's like that's not quite as wide-ranging, broad of a field as you think it is, fantasy horror. Most times when people say, oh yeah, this is kind of fantasy horror, it's just because it's a world that's a little horrific and it's like you wouldn't live very long in it. There's not a lot of ghosts and goblins and ghouls and things like that. But the one that I keep coming back to is one that everybody told me was just like one of the most horrific horror worlds out there. And I use it as a good excuse, I'm cheating a little bit, to continue with The Prince of Nothing. So this is The Warrior Prophet by R. Scott Baker. Again, I know that's kind of a cheat, but just I really want to do it, guys, because I loved The Darkness That Comes Before. And I'd already scheduled ahead other things that I was going to read last month. And it was just one of those things where I just said, I've got to go back to this world because it's just not left my head ever since I finished reading The Darkness Comes Before. So with this one, a lot of people have told me, you know what, that could classify as fantasy horror because, yeah, that world is messed up, and it does apparently get even more wacky, let's put it that way, when it comes to maybe flirting with some of the supernatural elements in it. So I'm excited to see. Obviously, you're dealing with these wizards that can do really, really messed up things. Perhaps they can manifest some demons and things like that. I don't know. I haven't gotten that far into the series yet, but I'm very excited to. But The Warrior Prophet is one that people have told me that not only they think it'll be my favorite in this trilogy, they think it might be one of my favorite books I read this year. So you're telling me it's better than Darkness Comes Before? That's very, very exciting for me. But Warrior Prophet, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil anything for you here. I proofread this to make sure it's completely out of context. You're not going to understand anything that's going on. But what is this one about? Well, the first battle against the heathen has been won. But while the great names squabble over the spoils, Kellis draws more followers to his banner. The sorcerer Alchemian and his lover Esmenet submit entirely, only to face an unimaginable test of faith. The warrior Nair falls ever deeper into madness, and the skin spies of the consort watch with growing trepidation. And across the searing waste of the desert, a name begins whispered among the faithful. Who is the warrior prophet? A dangerous heretic who turns brother against brother? Or the only man who can avert the second apocalypse? With the fate of the Holy War hanging in the balance, the great powers will have to choose between their most desperate desires and their most ingrained prejudice, between hatred and hope, between the warrior prophet and the end of the world. So I don't know how close we're going to get to this whole second apocalypse in this series, but I am anxious to find out more about this world. I can't get enough of it. And if it does kind of get a little bit more spooky than I originally had thought, well then, hey, I mean, look, in that world, I think everything is terrifying, obviously. But if you can get kind of those vibes, then I think that this is the only thing really keeping this from being one of my favorite series of all time. And it's really wild to say one book in, but that first book clicked with me so hard, and it has not left my head since. And I'm excited to get back to it. So that's the 4 that I have planned for spooky season. I don't know, I might fit one more thing in there if I get through these pretty quick, because that's a cool thing about horror book. Well, obviously, I mean, Warrior Prophet's going to be pretty thick, but everything else is moderately paced, or moderately in length, rather. It's not really a huge word count on any of these books, so I can feel like I can get through those at a decent pace. I might actually get to start those a little early because I'm finishing up the books right now. So first day of fall is Sunday here for us in the States, and that's kind of when spooky season can begin. So I might actually get past these. I have some really, really heavy reads in November, so I might actually just go ahead and start on some of those. I don't know. And that's kind of what I want to end this with. It's back to regularly scheduled programming in November, which does mean back to more fantasy, because I have enjoyed doing this as I have with the breaking it down by genres. I make sure I get more horror books, make sure I get more science fiction books and things out there. But guys, fantasy, that's my sweet spot. So doing one fantasy book a month. Am I really doing 12 fantasy books a year? No, I've got to get back to some fantasy. There's some big ones that I want to read that are available right now, and I've kind of scooted them because of spooky season. So I'm excited to do that, but I'm not looking past spooky season. I love the month of October. Halloween is maybe my favorite holiday every year. I love it so much. It's what really birthed my love for the horror genre as a whole, and I'm just excited that I can keep doing this with you guys here, and I hope that you will join me for some of these reads. So do you like any of these books? You guys going to join me for any of them? Do you have any of your own you're going to recommend? I have several years worth of spooky season content on the channel if you want to go back and look at some things, and I would love to hear what you think. So drop in the comments, guys, and let me know. I will talk to you there.